There are a lot of factors to keep in mind when it comes to growing healthy vegetables. It can be a little overwhelming to try and juggle all of these things. Everything from the small micronutrients your plants need to the big sweeping effects that come with the changing of the seasons. We're going to do you a solid and take some of the weight off your shoulders. We're going to talk to you about how to deal with some biotic threats to your garden. Biotic threats include all the living things that might mess with your plants, including diseases and soil microbes. Today, we're going to focus on the pests that chew on your chard and the weeds that burden your broccoli. Okay, but hold up. Let's define pests and weeds. Pests are any animals that eat our vegetables, and weeds are just plants that compete with our veggies for resources, such as sunlight, water, and nutrients. Simple enough, right? Unfortunately, their impact and how we solve these problems aren't so simple. So we're going to demonstrate some tools to help you get an idea of how your vegetables are coping with pests and weeds, and how to address simple problems with them. In fact, we're going to use some of the knowledge and tools that the pros utilize. Farmers face these problems daily. Not all of the tools we'll talk about are used by seasoned professionals, but this approach will give you some insight into their thinking process. Let's dig in. We can learn a lot by studying how a plant grows. One way we can measure how a plant grows is by consistently measuring changes in the growth of the leaves, which is a proxy for the growth of the plant as a whole. This can be an important tool to help you gauge how successful your management practice is for your garden or field. For instance, if you have one area that you weed every 3 days and one area that you weed every week, you can get an idea of which weeding practice works better. Similarly, if you have two different crops like chard and kale, or two different types of one crop like heirloom and Roma tomatoes, you can see which grows better in your garden. To measure growth, we will look at many leaves put together. When you look at all the leaves on a plant, you're looking at what is called the canopy. We'll measure the canopy by using a big square. This square is called a quadrat. You can use different sizes, but the one here is 1 meter squared. So let's use our quadrat to measure our veggies canopy. Begin by placing your quadrat randomly on a row of plants. Next, stand straight above the square. Imagine you cut this square up into 100 smaller squares. In this video, you can see a researcher using a cardboard square that represents 1% of the quadrat. He then uses his fist to approximate the size of the square. How many squares or fists are filled by the leaves you see? This number is the percent that your canopy takes up. If you do this regularly, you'll begin to collect some useful data. In this graph, you can see different management practices and the change in weed growth for each. We're talking about pests because the damage they cause can introduce diseases and reduce the amount of sunlight a plant gets by cutting away at the leaf. It can even prevent the plant from producing its edible parts, which are the parts we care about as vegetable growers. We can assess pest damage by looking at the nibbles on our broccoli plant and estimating what fraction of the total plant the bugs have eaten. You can create a system to identify how badly damaged your plant is, like rating the plant on a scale from 0 to 5, 0 being no damage and 5 being severely damaged. In addition to counting nibbles, you ought to look for pests in order to identify which kinds of pests may be eating your plants. Different kinds of pests can cause different kinds of bad effects on your veggies and are vulnerable to different methods to kill them. From here, you will be better equipped to proceed with management. As our broccoli plants grow, pest damage can be more and more problematic without proper management. It is important to understand that you will never get rid of all your pests or weeds. Also keep in mind that not all animals and weeds are bad. Some insects act as predators that eat pests, and some weeds provide a home for these predators. So instead of talking about getting rid of pests and weeds, we'll talk about management. Many conventional farmers use herbicides or chemicals to control weeds in their fields. A more systematic approach is through integrated weed management, which includes a number of different practices, such as weeding by hand or applying materials like mulch to cover weeds and prevent their growth. Some people even use animals like goats and sheep. There are several methods we can use to control insect damage of our plants. Some farmers use conventional methods like pesticides to control pests. Organic farmers rely more on a method called integrated pest management, or IPM, to prevent pests and keep their plants strong. We will talk about two environmentally safe methods to manage garden pests through IPM: soap and beneficial insects. By using soap, we can kill soft-shelled insects like aphids, thrips, and mealybugs by dissolving their cuticle. Mix Dr. Bronner's soap with water. Take a spray bottle and fill it with 2% soap and the rest with water. Coat the front and back surface of the leaves, anywhere that you see insects. It's better to remove the soap after you apply it, so try and time it with rain events or spray the plants down with plain water. Another approach is the use of predatory insects that prey on pests. These predators are called beneficial insects. A common crop pest is the aphid. Ladybugs love to eat aphids, so by introducing ladybugs to the field, you can control for aphids. These good insects might eventually fly away, but they'll hang out for a little while with your vegetables and keep them safe. So to summarize, we say pest and weed management because it's impossible to get rid of all pests and weeds. Instead, we'll do our best to balance things out and to keep the damage down. By studying how veggies and weeds grow and which pests cause your veggies to suffer, you can decide what practices are best to manage your garden.
Hello, I can't do it.